Welcome to the NC Everything Podcast. I'm your host, Curtis, and this is the bi-weekly show where I talk about everything that has anything to do with North Carolina. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you about an extinct state park, and I'll explain what that is when I get to it. But before I get into that, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe later on if you like the show. Don't worry about doing it right now, especially if this is your first time listening. If you're interested in more NC Everything, check out the description below, and there'll be a series of links down there. I have a link for the NC Everything Podcast Facebook group where the fans of the show and myself, we just post about all kinds of stuff in North Carolina. Anything North Carolina's appropriate for the group. But I will be honest, the past week, a little over a week, I've been really busy at work. I hadn't had a lot of Facebook scrolling time, so I haven't been on the Facebook group as much. But thank you to Linda, one of my most avid listeners, for helping me out with providing content on the Facebook group. Anyway, also in the description, you'll find a link to the YouTube channel if you're listening on a podcast player. If you're watching on YouTube, it won't be there. But this is a podcast and a YouTube channel. So if you're listening and you want to put a face with the voice, definitely check out the YouTube channel. Next is Tasting NC. That's a YouTube show I do with my wife where we taste everything that has anything to do with North Carolina. You'll find a link to the YouTube channel on there in the description below. And last is my contact information, which is the NCeverythingpodcast@gmail.com in case, you don't check. But anyway, that's where you can suggest an episode, suggest any kind of content. You can reach out and say hello, tell me what you think about the show, give me some ideas. I'll be honest with you, the contact is probably the least used, but it is still my favorite feature of the description. I've said this before, but I really do love hearing from the listeners. There's not a million of you, but I like hearing from each and every one of you. Now, on to the extinct state park. That is, by the way, Frutchey State Park. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. The only person I've ever heard say the word is me. And but it's Frutchey. I don't know why I spelled it. It's in the title. But I'm going to call it Frutchey State Park. It was named after the landowner, Lloyd Frutchey, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. The reason it is an extinct state park, which we'll get to in a little bit as well, is that it doesn't exist anymore. As a matter of fact, it was only a state park for about 20 years. Now, it didn't die out like the dinosaurs. The land is still there. It just changed names in 1955. And today, it's known as Town Creek, which I've heard of Town Creek and I've heard of Frutchey State Park. I didn't realize until recently that these were one and the same. So Town Creek, and it's Town Creek Indian Mound. I think that's the official name of it, Town Creek Indian Mound. I may call it Town Creek or Town Creek Indian Mound. You can find it about 5 miles southeast of Mount Gilead on the banks of the Little River in Montgomery County. Now, like always, I'm going to kind of go through the history of the area. So for thousands of years, the natives, specifically in North Carolina, all over the southeast, but the natives in North Carolina, their lifestyle was solely agriculture based, raising crops, eating crops, storing food. I'm sure there was, hunting and gathering, but it was mostly an agricultural society here in the southeast and specifically North Carolina. Somewhere around the 11th century, a new culture kind of came to be. And this new culture they called the PD, or the archaeologists are calling it the PD. That's P-E-E-D-E-E. That's, I'm assuming, named after the PD River. But this PD culture was part of a bigger culture called Mississppian. And the Mississippians, it wasn't like one tribe, but it was a culture. It was a huge group of people all throughout the Southeast. Let's see, Georgia, South Carolina, East Tennessee, West North Carolina, Southern North Carolina, Piedmont. The Mississippians, they built this really complex society. And so just in contrast, where a lot of Native American tribes and groups, day to day was mostly about survival. They were nomadic. They moved around. They survived here. They would move to warmer weather when the winters came in. They would transfer around depending on where the best hunting was. But the Mississippians, they built these huge societies, and these were permanent societies, huge villages. I'm not sure if it got as big as like the Mayan and the Aztecs, but it kind of reads like something similar to that. I think if it would have went on long enough, it probably would have grew as big as the Mayans or the Aztecs. And so again, the focus of everyday life isn't so much on just surviving. This new culture, they would build these huge mounds for spiritual and political use. And, again, you wouldn't think politics and Native Americans necessarily go together, but in the Mississippian society, politics and religion were huge day-to-day aspects. And not everything was just politics or religion. There was a huge trade system. People supported each other, craftsmen, tradesmen. It was a big support system throughout the whole society. So during the Town Creek phase, which is 1150 AD to 1250 AD, this area that we now call Town Creek, it started out as just a village of circular houses that made up kind of a plaza. Well, then, about 600 years ago, some migrating natives, they were looking for a new location for this ceremonial area, this ceremonial center that they wanted to build. Well, they come across this little spot here beside the little river, and they decided this was the place. And today we call this the Town Creek Center. So the Town Creek Center, it served, and I'm going to talk about this a lot, but it served as a secure place to discuss important business. And not just like a conference room. It was a meeting place for, I suppose, anything you wanted it to be. That would be political meetings, religious ceremonies, and even celebrations. It was kind of like your fellowship hall at church. But this wasn't just a big old village where everybody got together to be together. It was actually fortified. Now, I don't think it was fortified enough that it would necessarily defend against war, but it was definitely strong enough that you couldn't just bust your way in. The way it was described, and I have it somewhere here in my notes, it was the vertical poles. Now, I've seen this in Hillsborough at the Occoneechee village, but it was the vertical poles that had the mud and straw kind of packed in between it to form a clay wall. And I can't remember what this stuff is called. There's a name for it. I'll get to it eventually. But I've actually felt this stuff, and you think straw and clay, it wouldn't be that tough. No, it is very tough. It feels like concrete. Anyway, about 1250 AD, that's when the mound that I guess is the main feature down here at Town Creek, 1250 AD, the mound was built. Then we get into the leak phase, L-E-A-K. I guess I'll just put that on the screen. Anyway, the leak phase was 1300 to 1400. And this is when the area around the plaza, which, when I say plaza, I'm assuming it's the whole village is like the plaza. So during the leak phase, the area around the plaza, that's when it became open to family cemeteries. Now, to jump ahead for a second, they've done a lot of excavation there, which I'm going to talk about later, but they have found 217 burials containing 249 individuals. However, they estimate that there's been about 500 burials in the Town Creek area. So it was not all at one time, but over the years, it was a lot of people who had business here. Now, going back to politics for a minute, it says early political power inside the community was probably spread out between a bunch of individuals or groups, not just one person. Like, we have one president. It was probably several different leaders or elders. And another thing that didn't surprise me, because I've done a lot of reading on Native Americans, it may surprise you, is it wasn't just men who were the leaders either. It was spread between men and women. Now, I say it doesn't surprise me. John Lawson, he was a early surveyor, and he's written a few books. He did write a few books. This was back in the 1700s. But he toured North Carolina and spent a lot of time with the Native Americans in North Carolina. He left out of New Bern and went all the way to what we call Saxby today, the little town of Saxby, along the Hall River. And he spent a lot of time with the Native Americans. And I read that book. I don't remember the name of that one, but it was really interesting to see these or read about these firsthand accounts from Native Americans. But one thing I do remember he talked about was how women held such a high status in these societies. And you got to think, they raised the children, they prepared the food, and this wasn't like insignificant homemaking. They placed these women very high in society. And because of that, they certainly had a huge voice in decision-making and day-to-day politics. Anyway, back to the timeline. During the late occupation phase at Town Creek, it says these burial patterns changed. And this was when the mound was built in that late Town Creek phase. And what they mean by the burials changed, the graves they started finding on the mound and around the public buildings weren't just older folks anymore. It was actually young adults. And what it seems to suggest is that leadership changed frequently. I'm not sure if they killed off leaders, and that may be why the young adults are buried. But it was certainly, they seemed like they wanted to bury the leaders on the mound or pretty close to the mound. And so a lot of these burials are young adults. So it sounds like leadership didn't last too long for any one person. And the last thing I want to say about the deeper history of it, and a lot of this is based on archaeological evidence, but it seems like over time, the function of Town Creek changed over the years. And it moved from a site of like public rituals and ceremonies to more of one like community integration. So I don't know if like a flea market or farmer's market, but definitely one where these houses weren't private homes anymore. These were public structures. Everybody was welcome in, that kind of thing. And now you fast forward to the 1700s, the PD people had long ago moved out of the area and it was abandoned. And since it was abandoned, the settlers decided to call the place home. And believe it or not, they didn't really mess with the mound that much. You would think that they would grab the pickaxes because there's got to be gold in there. But no, they farmed all around the mound and, you know, up around the river, because since it's near a river, it was bound to be some fertile land. But for the most part, they left the mound alone. However, this period of ignoring the mound didn't last too long. In the late 1800s, that's when people really started digging into the mound to try to figure out what was there. And these people were certainly not archaeologists. In fact, they were probably treasure hunters. And based on what I read, you may even call them grave robbers. However, it doesn't sound like they really tore the place up too much. But now we're at 1936. Jeffrey Coe, who was a student at UNC Chapel Hill, he started leading archaeological excavations at the mound. And finally, somebody who knew what they were doing was kind of working here. Jeffrey Coe would ultimately work at the mound for the next 50 years. But anyway, Jeffrey Coe, he starts digging into the area in 1936. In 1937, the landowner, a guy named Lloyd D. Frutchey, he donated 1 acre of the land to the state of North Carolina. And of course, that part of that 1 acre was the mound. And I don't think he was just hoping for notoriety. He was actually hoping that the land would be protected and he could open it up for scientific, investigation. He was hoping good things for it. And it's a good thing. I've never been down there yet. It's somewhere I wanted to visit for a while, but it sounds like a really cool place. Anyway, in honor of Lloyd D. Frutchey, they named the place, or the area, Frutchey State Park. Now, since it was donated to the state of North Carolina, now you couldn't just go in there with your pickaxe. Not even Jeffrey Coe could go in there with his pickaxe and start digging away. You had to go through some red tape to get done what you wanted to do. And so it wasn't until 1939 when the Works Progress Administration Program approved excavation of the area that it really started getting dug into. Well, Frutchey State Park was named as Frutchey State Park was named as Frutchey State Park until sometime in the 40s. That's when the name was changed to Town Creek, and Frutchey State Park became an extinct state park. But this is also when Town Creek Indian Mound became the first North Carolina state historic site. And the whole site was transferred to the Department of Archives and History in 1955. During the 50s and 60s, that's when they started reconstructing what this place used to look like. And again, this was based on stuff they were finding, digging into it. And I'm going to get into that and kind of go into more detail what they found. But they were reconstructing the site. This so included, of course, the mound, but 2 temple structures, the burial house, and a surrounding stockade. However, excavations continued even after the reconstruction. And so what did they find? Well, an 11-foot or 3.5 meter tall platform mound, which, again, that's the main feature that's going to be there. But they also realized that the mound was built in multiple stages, which somewhere in here I kind of talk about the stages of the mound. All around the mound in the plaza, they found thousands of post holes and pits between the mound and the little river. Now, up until probably a couple years ago, I would have been completely clueless of how they, obviously there's not a post hole still in the ground. How do they know a post was there? I was watching a PBS documentary, I think it was PBS, and it was on the Lost Colony of Roanoke. And anyway, I think it was Roanoke. Anyway, they found post holes because where the posts were, I guess the posts had decomposed. So it would be a round section of completely different dirt. I guess more fertile or darker color. I can't remember now, but you could tell in the dirt that there was a post there. So as far as the mound being built in different stages, the mound that they have today was built over something they called an earth lodge. So they would put post holes in the ground and pile dirt up against the walls that these posts made, and they would pile dirt over top of it. And so it would almost be like a dugout. That doesn't sound right. Earthen mound, it'd be a structure inside, inside a hill. Oh yeah, it'd be like a dwelling inside of a hill. Well, as you may guess, eventually this hollow collapsed. And so the next people to work on the mound, they had this big collapsed hollow. So they, filled in all the rest of the hollow spots and piled dirt on it. And now you got this mound. And that's what they used to build the temple on the mound. Well, like in a lot of my historical episodes, there was a fire. So this temple, it burned. And so they built a new temple. And this time they built a ramp kind of going up to the temple. It only mentions the ramp here. I'm not sure. I'm sure there was probably some sort of path or trail going up to the temple before, but this time they built a definitive ramp going up to it. And when I was doing the early research on this episode, it kept talking about public ceremonies and stuff like that. And I thought it took place only on the mound, but apparently the public ceremonies they had took place in the whole plaza, inside the whole village. And that goes back to these dwellings weren't private homes. These were all public buildings. And I've mentioned them a couple times. I may mention them again. I'm not exactly sure what all purposes the public buildings served, but I don't know if they were like stores and shops. But I do know that some families were buried. Some of these structures were burial structures. So people were buried, I guess, under these structures or immediately around these structures. And again, the whole plaza was surrounded by this wall, and it was daub, D-A-U-B. I'll throw it on the screen. I guess I like to spell on this show, but yeah, I'll put that on the screen. It was called daub. So it was a mixture of clay and straw. And again, this stuff is, once it sets, it's really, really, really hard. Over the years, as they dug into the site, other archaeological evidence, it revealed that there was actually 2 guard towers in this plaza. So again, I say it wasn't necessarily built to defend against war, but I think it could probably hold its own for a little while anyway. And another cool fact, I talk about the Mississippians, and they were all over the southeast. I'm not sure if this is the biggest mound area in the southeast. My notes, what I found, it said this is the largest Mississippian site in the area. I'm not sure what they're constituting as the area. I feel like I had read about a large one somewhere farther west, maybe Mississippi. I don't know if I'm too on the nose about that, but I feel like there's a larger mound somewhere west of North Carolina. I may be wrong about that one. So I keep talking about ceremonies. I was curious, what sort of ceremonies? And I'm sure there were multiple ceremonies, but there was apparently a very popular ceremony called the busk, B-U-S-K. There goes spelling again. But it says this was the most important ceremony for the South Appalachian Mississippian people. During the busk, houses were cleaned, the temple and grounds were fixed, any kind of repairs were done, and all the fires, I guess, in the plaza were extinguished. However, a single sacred fire was then lit, and then people from all around would come to the mound area for purification. It describes ceremonial bathing, fasting, and then there's something else. And if you know anything about this, I would love for you to write in and tell me more about it. I couldn't find a whole lot about it, but it said part of the purification was scratching the body with gar fish teeth. And yes, the fish known as gar does have sharp teeth. I'm not sure what that did. I am friends with several Native Americans, mostly Cherokee, but if you know anything about scratching the body with gar fish teeth, I'm really curious about that. It says they would also take cathartic medicines. I'm not sure what falls under cathartic medicine. Cathartic, I messed that word up. cathartic medicine. I haven't researched that. I probably should have. I'm assuming because they're Native Americans, that was a lot of herbs, maybe a little tobacco or something else. I'm not sure, but they would take medicines. But the whole point of all of it was cleansing and getting ready for the new year. It says at the end of the busk ceremony, getting ready for the new year, they would all eat corn. And because I know when I grow corn, and again, you're getting ready for the new year, I'm assuming this happened toward the fall of the year. I doubt it happened in the winter. So I'm assuming fall, late summer or fall. And I couldn't really find how long the busk lasted. I'm assuming it would last for several days. I guess maybe like a revival. But at the end of the busk, all the people that came for the busk, they would return to their villages. And I thought this was cool. They would go home, but they would carry embers from that ceremonial fire, that single fire that they built. They would carry embers from this fire to start new fires in their homes. And if you know anything about Native American fires, these fires usually burned most of the year. It wasn't like nowadays we go camping and we put our fire out at the end of it. These fires in these villages, they would burn for months and months, if not the entire year. So they would take these embers and start their new yearly fire, I suppose, from the original embers from this ceremonial fire. And the reason they did this, it symbolizes unity among the PD people, making them people of one fire. Now, as we wrap up this episode, today at Town Creek, almost the entire mound has been excavated, which I say that, but it hasn't been torn to pieces. I mean, they do it delicately. I'm not spelling that one out. You know what I'm trying to say. But they've kind of went over the mound, but they've also excavated over 1 million square feet of the plaza area. They found 40 structures in all. And again, when I first started researching this, I've seen pictures from John Lawson's drawings of Native American villages that would be, 5, 6, 7, maybe 15 huts in all. They found 40 structures all around this mound. They've also found 250 burials in the immediate area. But again, they believe there have been 500 or more burials in the site over, centuries. The modern day site includes a visitor center, 2 temples, a burial house, a stockade, and of course the mound. And lastly, today the Town Creek site remains the only state historic site in North Carolina that's dedicated to Native American heritage. And if you're interested in visiting Town Creek, as interested as I am, it can be located at 509 Town Creek Mound Road, Mount Gilead, North Carolina, 27306. The hours of operation are Tuesday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. They are closed on Sundays and most major holidays, and the admission, which is my favorite part, is free. I hope they have a donation box, because if you know anything about our state parks or any of our state-operated stuff, those donations are really important. It helps keep the sites looking really nice. And no, I'm not pitching some kind of cry for money for these places, but yeah, if you visit any of our state parks, if there's a donation box, drop a couple dollars in there. These places are really nice, and I look around North Carolina, house developments are going up everywhere, construction, deforestation. These places, especially for me as I've gotten older, are ever more important to me. And sometimes it feels like we're getting suffocated by, I guess, modern society. So, again, anything we can do to help keep these places looking nice, I'm sure they appreciate it. I know I appreciate it. Your money helps me and my family go visit these places too. And anyway, I'm not going to go on a rant about that. That is the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to check the links below for more NC everything. And if you did like the show, I feel kind of good about this one. Some of the shows I don't feel that good about. I feel like I'm not as prepared, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired. But I feel good about this one. I don't know if tired had anything to do with that. But anyway, if you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, you might see that I'm out here in my orchard. The sun is setting, so the lighting is kind of weird, but I didn't feel like, I don't know, standing next to the house today, and I sure didn't feel like going up in my spare room where it's probably 150 degrees in there right now. Anyway, that's all I got. If you enjoyed the show, I already said that part. That's all I got. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to go on a rant here. So I guess thank you all for listening. I hope you stuck around for the whole thing. And Go visit Town Creek. I hope I get a chance soon. If I go down to Town Creek, I'm going to take plenty of pictures for the Facebook page, the Facebook group. But anyway, that's all I got. So I'll talk to you in a couple weeks.